Welcome to the Gentleman's Podcast. I'm Eric, and this is
Aiden B.
I'm Colin L.
And they are two Chicago historians. And today we're going to talk about the Gilded Age. So the Gilded Age lasted from 1870 to the 1900s. And during that time, many positive and negative things occurred. However, some of those were highly controversial and impacted society as of today. So we're going to talk about those, and we're going to decide if those are good or bad and how they truly affected Chicago. So Colin, why don't you tell us about the first positive thing that happened during the Gilded Age?
One of the first positive things that happened during the Gilded Age was the completion of the L train. Now, everyone today knows the L train as
Of course.
a very efficient way to get
I wouldn't
around
say
Chicago.
efficient.
It is a way to get around Chicago.
That is.
Right.
I, for one, use it every day.
Yes.
That is.
Exactly.
I know. Me and Aiden take the bus every day.
It was completed in 1893, shortly before the Chicago fire. In the early years, it expanded into the city because at first the lines stopped short of the center city. Before 1900, it was then expanded to create the now famous loop around the main business district.
Okay.
Before 1925, a new branch, what we now know today as the Brown Line, was added to Kimball and Lawrence. It has expanded several times since then. For example, in the 1940s, into the Chicago Transport Association. Now, this particular event helps summarize the Gilded Age because the Gilded Age was a corrupt time. This particular event, the building of the L train, it helps summarize the Gilded Age because the Gilded Age was a corrupt time. However, the L train is an example of something good that came out of the Gilded Age.
Okay. So you can say that the L train was a light shining through the darkness that provided a great impact on the community and for all the people who
Yes.
couldn't afford, say, a car at the time.
That's right.
All right.
It offered a easier, sometimes faster way to get around the city.
All right.
And it's still in service today.
But all right. Now going back to the negatives and the corruption, Aiden, why don't you tell us about a negative and unfortunate event that happened?
So I'm going to be talking about the Haymarket riots of 1894. This
And-
event followed the Civil War as it happened like 30 years after, and it involved the workers and the companies that they employed the workers from.
Okay.
So
and
basically in the Gilded Age, the workers were not paid well at all. They had horrible wages and they worked unruly hours.
okay.
And naturally they wanted to get a pay raise and they wanted to get better working
Of course.
hours.
As anyone would.
So one work day, on a just random day, they started leaving the building in protest of their low pay wages.
All right.
This sort of escalated, and a huge crowd started bursting out of the building, and it was really bad. And in the middle, someone threw a lit stick of dynamite and blew up 6 people in the crowd.
That
Sounds like a very tragic event.
very tragic, and that goes to show on how it was very corrupt and how these companies didn't provide or care for their employees.
Right.
Now,
To make matters worse, the government did not let them get a higher pay raise, and they ended up working their same hours.
that is truly tragic. Thank God we live in a more just and right society today.
God bless.
God bless. Amen. All right, back over to you, Colin. I wanna talk about something that I'm very fond of, and that is nature. I'm a big environmentalist, and I love the nature. So why don't you tell us about an environmental aspect of the Gilded Age and something that took place very long ago, and how that actually affected Chicago and a whole different schematic.
There's one particular event I'm going to refer to.
Okay.
Many people today do not take it for granted, but Chicago actually reversed the flow of the Chicago River
Interesting.
back in the early 1900s. As a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project, one of the largest engineering accomplishments of the decade. In fact, of the century. Now,
Truly phenomenal.
it really was.
No, tell what did they do exactly? What was this grand engineering project that you're explaining?
So the problem that Chicago had is we dumped all of our waste, all of our sewage into the Chicago River.
Ew.
And
Very
we
nasty.
got, it is very disgusting, yes.
Yes.
and we got all of our fresh drinking water from Lake Michigan. Well, back then, 1800s, the Chicago River flowed into Lake Michigan, which means all the sewage that we dumped was in our drinking water. So, to help solve that problem, a man named Sylvester Chesborough thought up with the brilliant idea of reversing the flow of the river so that it flowed into the Mississippi River. Now, this idea was not a very popular idea. Not everyone liked it. However, this was the only option they had, and they proceeded with it. This also helped contribute the building of the I&M Canal, which was a few years earlier. However, this offered another option of transit to get to the Mississippi River.
Oh, look at that. Another shine of light in the darkness that truly embraced Chicago and helped us today.
Very much so.
But not all of that light escaped the darkness. And tell us about the
Iroquois Theater.
what happened at this theater, Aiden, and what went down that night?
So, for a bit of context, the Iroquois Theater was an amazing feat of architecture. It was made with many pristine marbles and very brilliant architecture. Some critics that visited the palace, some called it, they said it was one of the best theaters they've ever visited.
Truly a state of art, wasn't it?
And, well, it looked great. It had many flaws to it. And on the fateful day of December 30th, 1903, there was a huge fire in the theater and killed around 2,000 people. This was because it had very poor architecture for safety features. It had no fire extinguishers, no fire exits, no exit signs, no sprinkler system, and there was no emergency phone to contact the police in an event such as a fire. This event summarizes the Gilded Age because, while the palace looked beautiful and looked very well built, it had many flaws on the inside, which had devastating problems on Chicago as a whole.
Which relates to the businesses that took place during that time.
Exactly.
I get you now, Ethan. All right, back to you, Colin. I want to talk about the railroad strike.
Yes, the railroad strike, Eugene V. Debs, and the railroad strike of 1894.
Tell me about this. Now, what exactly happened at this railroad strike? Was it like Aiden's worker strike that we talked about moments ago, and how people stormed out and there was a riot and people died, or was it a more peaceful protest and people were actually able to get better wages? Why don't you tell me about that?
It was similar to the Haymarket riot. However, in the case of the railroad strike, the workers were victorious. They earned better pay and better hours.
That's great to hear.
It is. However, the key issue here, which led to the strike, employees often laid off, and when they did have jobs, they were not paid a lot.
Sort of like today.
Sort of like today, yes.
Still fighting, you know. Never give up that fight.
So workers, they wanted better pay,
Okay.
and employers wanted more workers.
Right.
Both strive to get a better economy.
Both had both had mutual problems, you could say, and
Right.
they both needed that sort of solution that could answer both problems if they just worked together to solve
Yes.
them.
Both
And they
parties had
accomplished
good intentions.
That's right.
Exactly.
Now,
Well said.
as we said, the workers victorious. They earned more pay.
Okay.
This is a good example of the Gilded Age because it does show some of the corruption in the Gilded Age.
Right.
However, it shows how the people saw this. They saw the corruption that was happening in the Gilded Age,
And they fought against.
They fought
They
against.
fought-
it.
they
That's right.
actually
they
stood up.
solved the problems.
That is great to hear.
It is fantastic.
That
What
I mean,
like about this event is that these are just regular people. They worked their day-to-day lives, and even though they saw all of this corruption and negativity happen, they wanted to do something about it.
they knew it wasn't right, and they put up a fight, and they put their foot down and decided to fight for those people's rights.
My thoughts exactly, Eric.
Humanity at its greatest. But unfortunately, some of humanity's inventions don't go that well, and that comes down to our designs. Now, Aiden, I was looking at before the podcast, I was looking at our facts, you can say, our little details, and I was saying that I was looking at this one disaster. Why don't you tell me about this? This caught my eye.
This tragic disaster, or some would even say negative disaster, was known as the Eastland Shipwreck This large boat that held many people, like I'm pretty sure it was like in the tens of thousands. It was supposed to be a transatlantic cruise, I'm pretty sure. And what happened was there was a small design on the hull of the ship, and it caused a small flood. This obviously and rightfully scared the passengers, and they all moved to one side of the boat hoping to give it some leverage and keep it afloat. Unfortunately, this made the boat capsize and kill all of the passengers on board.
So it said that over 800 people died. Is that right?
Yes, that is true.
Tragic.
Tragic.
This was very bad and impacted the time period because it showed people that these safe, quote unquote safe, designs
Contraptions.
contraptions.
You expect to get on
inventions.
you expect to take a little ride on the boat, and then ends up totally capsizing, and it kills you, and that's really sad.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Nothing that you could have caused, or nothing your fault.
Mm-hmm. Very corrupt.
It was corrupt. These businesses, they sort of like the theater. They went for the grand scheme of things. They wanted to make their boats in theaters look as grand, as beautiful as they could, but they ended up missing the key points, which is the safety of their customers, because they overlooked that, and instead of providing their great time for their customers, they ended up killing them, which is tragic. But we've learned from our mistakes of the Gilded Age, and we are in a much better society, I would say.
Indeed.
However, we still struggle with the concept of, was the Gilded Age good or bad? So I want to ask all of our listeners and viewers out there, what are your thoughts on the Gilded Age?